incompetent lawmakers, he said, were wrecking the country. And he was right. They were wrecking the country. And yet today, in a remarkable twist, the president held a televised meeting with the very swamp creatures he once denounced. He told them he trusted them to craft immigration policy without his input. Then he suggested he'd be willing to accept any deal they produced, even a bad one.
When this group comes back, hopefully with an agreement, this group and others from the Senate, from the House, comes back with an agreement, I'm signing it. I mean, I will be signing it. I'm not going to say, oh, gee, I want this or I want that. I'll be signing it because I have a lot of confidence in the people in this room that you're going to come out with something really good.
At one point, the president agreed with Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein of California that it would be wise to handle the question of DACA separately before negotiating any meaningful reform of our broken and dysfunctional immigration system.
And I don't know how you would feel about this, but I'd like to ask the question, what about a clean DACA bill now, and with a commitment that we go into a comprehensive immigration reform procedure like we did back, I remember when Kennedy was here, and it was really a major effort, and it was a great disappointment that it went nowhere.
I have no problem. I think that's basically what Dick is saying. We're going to come out with DACA. We're going to do DACA, and then we can start immediately on the phase 2, which would be comprehensive.
Would you be agreeable to that?
Yeah, I would like to do that.
Key allies very close to the president on immigration told us this afternoon they were shocked by what they saw in that meeting. It was a completely different Donald Trump from the one we watched on the campaign trail just 2 years ago. How different? Let's put it this way. Trump's rival from the 2016 race, Jeb Bush, who was on the far left of Republican sentiment on immigration questions, tweeted these words in response to the meeting, quote, "Encouraged, the president is seeking bipartisan solutions to our immigration challenges." In 2016, Donald Trump ran on the premise that America's borders ought to be real, that the repeated amnesties of the past have betrayed voters, and that this country deserves an immigration policy that looks out for American interests rather than those of foreign countries. Almost nobody in Washington agreed with him at the time. Almost nobody in Washington agrees with him now. Congress is full of people from both parties who believe that the point of our immigration policy is to provide cheap labor to their donors and to atone for America's imaginary sins against the world. They couldn't care less about immigration's effect on you or your family. Yet these are the same people the president now says he trusts to write the immigration bill, the one he'll sign no matter what it says. So what was the point of running for president? You'll remember the president also ran on his skills as a negotiator, and he clearly has skills as a negotiator. But where were they today? The president signaled he'd be happy to legalize hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants now, and then at some point in the future tackle all that other stuff, like making sure they can't bring millions of their relatives from the third world along with them. That's not much of a negotiation. Amnesty for DACA recipients is the only leverage the White House has. Once the president agrees to let them jump to the head of the line, ahead of millions of other people hoping to come here legally, the negotiation is over. At that point, why would Democrats agree to anything? Ending chain migration, the diversity lottery, supporting a merit-based system that might actually help America? No chance. The Democrats' goal is to import more Democratic voters, and by any means necessary. Once they retake the Congress and the presidency, and if Trump betrays his base in immigration, that'll definitely happen, it is over. Say goodbye to borders. They are done. Keep in mind that the top Democrat in the House recently thanked illegal aliens for sneaking into this country. That's how Democrats feel, and they're not pretending anymore. Being a Trump voter isn't always easy. It's like rooting for the underdog in baseball, the old Chicago Cubs. On one level, there is pride, the pride that comes from doing something that fashionable people consider insane. And that's a good feeling. But there's also some disappointment along the way, and honestly, there's some embarrassment. But you silently bear it because you know that when they finally win the World Series, it'll be worth everything you went through. Every sarcastic dig from your brother-in-law at Thanksgiving will seem small by comparison. In the Trump presidency, the World Series is this immigration bill. It's the big payoff. It's the whole point of the exercise, and they're not allowed to blow it. Jorge Ramos is an anchor at Univision News and Fusion Television, and he joins us tonight. Jorge, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I never imagined that I would be on Fox News listening to you criticizing President Trump on immigration, but thanks for inviting me.
It's a matter of the principle, and this is the principle, which is that a country has a right to determine who enters it and who gets citizenship, who votes, who chooses the government. That's what a country is. And I can't imagine how you could publicly disagree with that, and yet you seem to.
No, what I also agree, Tucker, is that we have an immigration problem. I think we all agree with that. There are 11 million people who are here illegally, and they are here because of us. They are harvesting the food that we eat. They're building our homes. They're taking care of our kids. And we have to find a solution. And President Trump, surprisingly, I don't trust him, I don't believe him, but surprisingly in this meeting, he said he wants comprehensive immigration reform. You and I remember since year 2000 that whenever we say comprehensive immigration reform, that means legalizing 11 million people in this country. And if the president wants to do that, I'm all for it. However, I'm not sure that tomorrow President Trump is going to come with a tweet or with an interview and change again.
Let me just stop and challenge your premise, which is deeply disingenuous. Sure. And that is that it's somehow our fault, corporately all of our fault, that 11 million people snuck in the country are now demanding to become citizens. It's not. Hold on. It's not. No, that's not true. It's not because of me. It's not because of most people I know. It's because a small number of employers wanted to pay less for labor, and the Democratic Party wanted new voters. I didn't do that, and there's no reason that I should have to live under a government controlled by people who came here illegally. Why should I?
They're here because of you and me. It's simply a matter of supply and demand. They're here simply because there are jobs for them, and also we have to admit, because in Latin America they make maybe $5 a day. And they can make that exact amount of money here in just a few hours. But we are responsible for them. And
so
then,
we're responsible. So in other words, so because this is a successful country,
you and I are responsible. We are responsible for them.
Because we have taken the time to build a functioning country, a clean, safe country with a working justice system and a thriving economy, then we are somehow morally required to let anybody who wants to come here come, and we can't complain about it? How does that work exactly?
No, because every time you go to a hotel, every time you go to a restaurant, they're helping you. They are working for us.
No, they're not working for me. They're working for companies that want to pay less. That's why they hire them. And the owners of those companies make a lot of money. And we get to pay higher taxes in order to support them living here.
Just for a while. But for instance, the National Academy of Sciences recently conducted a study, and they concluded that all immigrants in this country, they contribute more than $2 billion every single year. This is an immigration surplus. And not only that,
that's an absurd number.
You can laugh about that.
I'm laughing because I know a lot about the subject, and that's a fake number.
Those are the facts. Should I trust you, or should I trust the National Academy of Sciences?
Right,
I'm sorry, but I believe the National Academy of Sciences on economy.
But I'd rather than throw around fake numbers, I'd rather get to the principle, though. You make a fair point, which is supply and demand is driving this. There are people who want to hire illegally, for sure. You're absolutely right there. It's not me, but some employers do. But why should American citizens, who by and large are not responsible for illegal immigration, have to live in a country where people who sneak in illegally get the vote and determine who runs their government? I don't understand. No other country would allow that.
We all benefit from that. And then, of course, on comprehensive immigration reform, if it's true what President Trump is proposing, and I don't think he's telling the truth, or that he even understands what's happening here, then they might have the opportunity eventually, in decades from now, to vote or not. That's not the issue at this point. We're not even discussing comprehensive immigration reform.
Well, it's very much the issue for me, an American citizen. I don't want to be governed by people who snuck into the country. But let me ask you this. If you come here illegally, now you're demanding that people who came illegally have the right to be here legally and get citizenship. Why should those people be allowed to bring their relatives from a foreign country? Where does that right come from?
Chain migration. Now everybody's using the term chain migration.
Well, it's the majority of immigration is chain migration,
actually,
so it's not a small thing.
It's called family reunification.
You call it whatever you want. It's the same thing.
Do you enjoy spending time with your family, Tucker?
Well, look, I'm not going to pretend. Look, this is too serious a matter to participate in theoreticals. Let me just ask you: why, if you sneak into this country, should you have a right to bring your relatives?
Let's just say that you do. Well, immigrants do too. They do enjoy spending time with their families. And since 1965, and this was inspired by JFK before he died, since 1965, the policy that we have here in the United States favors family reunification. and bring in those who have special talents to this country.
But you're missing it. But no one is arguing, by the way, that DACA recipients have special talents. Nobody's even more DACA recipients.
No, they were too young for that.
Okay,
they were too young for that.
But that's not relevant here. But I'm just saying, I know it's the policy. Why should it continue to be the policy? That's the question. Why is it a wise policy?
Because I think it's a wise policy. I think it has worked well for this country. Just see the number of CEOs, immigrants or sons of immigrants, who are leading major companies in this country. I think when President Trump uses the term chain migration, those are code words. He's really saying, you know, I don't want more immigrants from Asia or Latin America coming to this country. I want to stop that. And I want to make America white again.
What you're doing is throwing because what you're doing, rather than engage in an adult argument using reason, you're accusing people you disagree with of bigotry, which is a little much, actually, considering that you're demanding that Americans who were born here let in people who snuck in illegally and all their family, and if they say anything about it, they're racist.
Let me just say that chain migration,
I get the game, actually, and I'm sick of it.
Migration or family reunification.
Doesn't matter. The principle's the same.
That's the law of the land.
How would you feel if the United States exported the poorest 10% of its population to Mexico, exported the poorest 10% of its population to Mexico, completely changed the mix of Mexico, the politics of Mexico, and undercut the wages of Mexican citizens, and then if anyone complained about it, said, well, you're just a racist, would you think that was kind of a stick-up?
I understand what's happening in Mexico, and it's terrible what's happening in Mexico. I cannot defend, and I do not defend what's happening in Mexico. Absolutely not. Was that your question?
No, that's not the question, but we're out of time, sadly. But I know that we will meet again. All right, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, during today's televised immigration talk, Senator Lindsey Graham joked about how the final DACA deal will likely infuriate those opposed to amnesty, including people on this channel.
I'm Lindsey Gramnesty, Lindsey Gomez. You name every name you want to give to me. It's been assigned to me. And I'm still standing. The people of South Carolina want a result. How could I get elected? I've been for a pathway to citizenship for 11 million people because I have no animosity toward them. I don't want crooks. I don't want bad hombres. I want to get a merit-based immigration system to make sure we can succeed in the 21st century. I'm willing to be more than fair to the 11 million. I just don't want to do this every 20 years. Now, we made the decision, Mr. President, not to do it comprehensively. I think that's a smart decision, but a hard decision. We've passed 3 comprehensive bills out of the Senate with over 65 votes. They go to the House and die, and I'm not being disparaging to my House colleagues. This is tough politics if you're a Republican House member turning on the radio. To my Democratic friends, thanks for coming. The Resist movement hates this guy. They don't want him to be successful at all. You turn on Fox News, and I can hear the drumbeat coming. Right-wing radio and TV talk show hosts are going to beat the crap out of us because it's going to be amnesty all over again.
Senator Graham instantly turned down our request to come on tonight and explain himself. So did virtually every Republican we reached out to. Congressman Rodney Davis of New Jersey, though, rather of Illinois, said yes, and we're grateful that he did. He joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Tucker.
So I understand the concern about DACA recipients, some of whom, didn't choose to come here and they're stuck here. And it's a sticky situation. I get it. But if you're creating a hierarchy of concerns, why is this a more pressing matter than, say, the opioid crisis or the rise in health care education costs for American citizens?
Well, thank you, Tucker. I actually think those two issues are somewhat related. The president and many of us have said we'd like to get a DACA fix. We want to make sure that the president continues to have the opportunity to show leadership like he has on such a very difficult issue. And we can also implement some Republican immigration reforms, border security measures. You mentioned the opioid crisis. You talk to any law enforcement official in my district in central Illinois, they will tell you the scourge of heroin and ice that are coming through our southern border. We need some physical structures down there. Let's let the Border Patrol decide where they go.
For sure. I mean, that sounds sensible. But the core of this, the centerpiece, the debate really is over giving amnesty to DACA recipients. How does that help American citizens? How does it help any of your voters? It wouldn't seem to help any of them.
Well, first off, let's take a step back. Let's see what comes of this meeting. Obviously, again, I thought the president showed great leadership and a very difficult issue that he's willing to take a stand on. Let's actually see what the legislative language looks like. Let's see if there's any bipartisan agreement. But at the end of the day, let's try and solve a problem that the president asked us to solve when he got rid of an unconstitutional executive action.
Right. No, I get it. And it's a tough place. And it was a trap laid by the previous administration. And Republicans, of course, walked right into it. But I get, if you take 3 steps back, it seems a little bit weird that we're about to shut down the government over legalizing illegal aliens when 60,000 Americans died last year of drug ODs and no one can afford college. And there's like a lot of bad things going on in the country. But the concern of illegal aliens is put to the very top of the list. Can you see why people would be kind of bewildered by that?
Well, the only ones talking about shutting down the government over this issue are the Democrats. It's not the Republicans. We want to have a common sense solution that includes some border security measures. And they're the ones that want to see this linked to a government shutdown, to a funding vote. Let's have a great meeting like the president did today. Let's see what the end results are. Let's see if Senator Durbin and the rest of the Democrats come out after this meeting and still want to negotiate a border security measure that includes some physical structures. Let's see what comes of this meeting before we even see the legislation that comes out and see the end result of that.
But if Republicans accept a deal that doesn't include universal E-Verify, that doesn't end chain migration and the diversity lottery and build a wall, why would anybody ever vote Republican again, honestly?
Well, I think, again, this is our opportunity. If you have ideas that are Republican immigration reforms, the president clearly said, now's the time to put those ideas on the table. These are issues that we've been talking about in our conference for years. As a matter of fact, you know, most of the illegal immigration in this country doesn't even come through our southern border. It comes through our airports. People overstaying their visas who were here legally, and we don't have any biometric capability to be able to track them and figure out where they've gone.
Would you support a deal that doesn't end chain migration for DACA recipients?
You know, again, let's see what the bill looks like, because I think these are some of the priorities that the president has clearly laid out in the past, and I believe will clearly lay out with Republican support as we look ahead to the next few days.
Yeah, this is making me nervous. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Deleted a paper questioning his employer's diversity policies. He didn't attack anyone. He just questioned the internal logic of what he was being told. For that, the company vilified him and his character and then fired him. Now, Damore and another ex-Google employee, David Guterman, are suing that company. They're accusing Google of systemic bias against white employees, men, and conservatives. Their 161-page lawsuit exposes a climate at Google, a place where biased, hateful, and even violent political rhetoric is totally acceptable, just as long as it's directed against the right targets. The suit contains documents that shows Googlers openly maintain, for example, politically motivated employee blacklists. Here's one. In 2015, Google manager Paul Cowan wrote the following on Google's internal networks for all employees to see. If you express a dunderheaded opinion about religion, about politics, or about social justice, it turns out I'm allowed to think you're a halfwit. I'm perfectly within my rights to mentally categorize you in my D-head box. Yes, I maintain mentally, but not yet publicly, a blacklist. If I had to work with people on this list, I would refuse and try to get them removed. Well, the blacklists were real and not just internal. They also applied to conservative figures from outside the company. Blogger Curtis Yarvin, known online as Mencius Moldbug, once visited Google to have lunch with an employee. According to the suit, Yarvin's arrival triggered a silent alarm at Google. Security arrived to escort him off campus. His mere presence was considered unacceptable. According to the lawsuit, Google employees were awarded with bonuses by the company for publicly denouncing Damore's memo. In April of 2017, Google manager Chris Bissell advised employees if they spoke at conferences, they should do so only while demanding that white males from other companies be kicked off panels in favor of women or non-white employees. Quote, "You'll feel pretty damn smug about doing it," Bissell said. Google HR said Bissell's attacks on the basis of race and gender somehow broke no company rules. And that's just scratching the surface of what Damore has brought to light. The suit has more than 100 examples of employees and managers saying conservatives or Trump supporters ought to be fired, defending political violence, implementing quota systems to discriminate against white people and men to the benefit of other favored groups. It's intense, it's appalling, but don't kid yourself. It's not just happening at Google. Last night, Dennis Finley, who was an editor at the Burlington Free Press, was fired by the media giant Gannett because he dared to question a proposal that would add a third gender option to driver's licenses in Vermont. Now, if you're conservative, it might be difficult to get your head around what is happening in this country. So much has changed. But here's the bottom line. The federal government is no longer the main threat to your privacy and to your freedoms. You've grown up thinking that. It's no longer true. Big corporations are the main threat to your freedom and your privacy. The government doesn't own your private emails. Google does. Federal employees can't be fired for their political views. Private sector employees are all the time. The Trump administration can't end your ability to publicly communicate your ideas. Twitter and Facebook can do that, and they do it all the time. The Orwellian future is increasingly the Orwellian present, and tech barons are becoming our new commissars. Liberals who once admirably stood up for free expression and in opposition to concentrations of corporate power have been thoroughly co-opted. They're getting rich from it. James Damore has seen it all from the inside firsthand. He joins us now with his lawyer, Harmeet Dillon. Welcome to you both.
Happy to be here.
So, James, in reading these documents, what's so striking is not just that you got fired for expressing your views, and I want to restate, having read the piece that got you fired, you weren't attacking anybody, but you were raising questions. You got fired for that. But Google seemed to feel the need to vilify you after you got fired, to discredit you, to attack your character, and to encourage others to do the same. That seems Stalinist. Why did they feel the need to do that, do you think?
Because I attacked their orthodoxy, and they really need to send a message to other employees that, no, you can't do this, you can't question our policies.
Yeah, well, they certainly did, paying bonuses to people who denounced you, like a Khmer Rouge re-education session. So, Harmeet, in this complaint, you have example after example of Google targeting people on the basis of their race and their sex. My impression was that was illegal. Is it?
It is illegal. It's illegal under federal law. It's illegal under California law. And what a lot of lawyers even around the country don't understand, that under California law, we have a unique labor code provision that makes it illegal to discriminate against somebody on the basis of their political activities or their political views. So that is among the claims in our lawsuit. And that can actually affect a lot, and it has affected women at Google. So to be clear, our lawsuit actually includes women as well if they've been discriminated against on the basis of any of these protected characteristics.
But I mean, Google is the most powerful company in the world, the most famous company in the world, and they're doing this openly. I mean, on internal servers, they don't seem to have worried they were going to get in trouble for violating a pretty basic law. Why?
Well, so they're a $700 billion plus company. They are ubiquitous. They have virtual monopoly power over search engines, and they've been getting away with it for a long time. Now, probably you and I and some other conservatives have been alarmed about what we've read about Google being able to scan Gmail and keep all of your data. That's what's really troubling about this. They, at one time, know everything about you. And at the other hand, they're using that information against you. We've seen them do this in their commercial practices as well. The demonetization of viewpoints they don't believe in on YouTube and other places. And I'm hearing from people inside the company and people who've left the company that their artificial intelligence programs for search engines similarly are applying political biases and filters. And you and I wouldn't even know it. And eventually we're going to find that they're controlling what people think. They are. Obviously inside the company, they're getting away with punishing people and controlling what people think. And, people don't understand that on Silicon Valley, they have these campuses. And you come to the campus in the morning, they take care of your dry cleaning, all of your meals, entertainment, everything. And so people are in this little bubble. It's like the brave new world of Silicon Valley.
And that's fine, shocking. But the fact that they're controlling our political dialogue and the way people experience reality, and Congress just sits there passively as if they have no authority, is contemptible. So, James, I would encourage, by the way, our viewers to go online and read what you wrote, because it's hardly radical, it's sensible and smart. Do you think that being at odds with Google is going to affect your future employment prospects?
Yes, definitely. And many employees have made it clear that they're spreading the message about not only me, but anyone that they've discovered that has certain viewpoints, to blackball them out of careers within Silicon Valley.
So why is that not terrifying?
Oh, I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, for every James Damore who got fired, Tucker, there are many people inside the company who we represent who are afraid to even raise their hand and say this is happening to me, because the threat is not just of a blacklist within Google, but of a blacklist within the entire tech community throughout the United States. That's how scary this is.
If you're a conservative and you grew up thinking that the federal bureaucracy was the greatest threat to you, it takes a while to realize, no, it's not actually. It's Google, and they have more power. And I just Godspeed to you both, and we really wish you well, and we'll be following this case. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
Thank you.
A top Senate Democrat just released the transcript of a closed-door testimony given by the founder of Fusion GPS. What is BuzzFeed, the blog, for publishing a dossier of unverified allegations against Trump last year? Cohen told our Serafin Gomez at Fox, quote, "I have filed a complaint versus BuzzFeed and Ben Smith for the lie-filled dossier." We'll continue to follow those details. And speaking of the dossier, Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson testified to Congress back in August. Until now, his remarks had remained secret. But today, Dianne Feinstein, the Democrat of California, abruptly released a transcript of Simpson's remarks, and it raises new questions about the dossier. During his testimony, Simpson said the FBI found the dossier believable because it had a source inside the Trump campaign who had provided corroborating information. Simpson also said that somebody, or his lawyer said, someone had been murdered due to the release of the dossier. Congressman Eric Swalwell is a Democrat representing California, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Of course, Tucker. I see you're in California tonight, and I hope my parents take care of you. They're probably the only other conservatives in the area.
Having dinner with them after the show.
Good.
And
good.
Speaking of, I want to give credit where it's due, and good for Dianne Feinstein for releasing this. I think the public has a right to know, and I'm glad that she did. I don't think there are a lot of bombshells. I've looked at it. I don't think there are a lot of bombshells, but there is one point that really sticks out, and I'm wondering what you make of it. So in this testimony, Steele says that, Simpson says that Steele, who's the agent he hired on behalf of the Hillary campaign, spoke to the FBI, which told him that they had a source within the Trump campaign and that source corroborated there was a relation between Russia and the Trump campaign. So here you have, in the middle of a presidential campaign, September 2016, the Obama FBI giving dirt on the Trump campaign to Hillary Clinton's opposition researcher. I know you're a partisan Democrat. Does that bother you at all?
Well, no. It was before it was the Obama FBI. It was the Bush FBI. These are career agents who serve
this was
Republican
the Obama
and Democratic.
Well, I know, but hold on. This was the FBI controlled by the Obama administration.
Not controlled.
I'm not saying they're dirty. I'm just
Tucker.
saying, what do you make of that? The Obama FBI tells Hillary Clinton's opposition researcher in the middle of a presidential campaign in which she's running that her opponent's campaign has connections to Russia. How is that allowed in America?
Well, first, I'll tell you, Tucker, law enforcement folks are quite offended by these attacks, calling it, the Obama FBI. They don't give a rip about politics. They don't care about politics. But they have opinions.
They may not. They may not. Some of them clearly do. We know from Strzok's text to his girlfriend. Some of them care a lot about politics, and they're open partisans. Some don't. I agree. I'm not attacking the whole FBI, but I'm saying that we have, in the release of this transcript, evidence, and I think we both agree it's real, that the FBI told Hillary Clinton's opposition researcher something negative about her opponent. That is not supposed to happen, is it?
Well, the FBI usually keeps information on a close hold. Christopher Steele was as I think this dossier lays out, was a pretty credible investigator for Fusion GPS. I don't know what was exchanged between Christopher Steele and the FBI. I think we should know, Tucker. Those are fair questions. But what I think is more important is what is alleged in the dossier.
Steele was working for Fusion GPS. Correct me if I'm misstating this. Steele was working for Fusion GPS, which was on retainer to the Hillary campaign to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. Campaigns do that. Both sides do it. I get it. But he is, in effect, working as an oppo researcher for Hillary Clinton's campaign, and the FBI is revealing sources and methods to him in the middle of a presidential campaign.
I think we should find out if that's true.
That's what we stop the presses and say, what?
Well, I think we stop the presses when Christopher Steele stumbles upon evidence that Donald Trump has a financial relationship with Russia. That to me is more concerning.
Well, maybe. I'm sure Trump has. I don't know. The guy's been in business a long time. I have no idea. But about his financial relationships with various Russians, I don't know. I'm agnostic on it. But
and some of what's been alleged in the dossier has been proved true.
Okay, but I'm just saying, I know what it looks like when politics subverts criminal justice. And that starts to happen when criminal investigators who have vast federal authority, like the FBI, start talking to the Oppo researchers for political campaigns in the middle of a presidential year. I mean, that is just absolutely over the top outrageous.
And what did Bob Mueller do? He could have kept him or throw him off the investigation. He threw him off. I don't know what else, you'd want him to do. He's gone. He's not on the investigation.
We don't know that. Actually, it sounds like entirely possible that the FBI paid money to Fusion GPS. We don't know the answer to that, do we? But that's an open question. It's been alleged, and they haven't really answered the question. Aren't you anxious to know?
Let's ask it, but let's also ask the questions around what's alleged in the dossier. And also, there's a whole mountain of evidence that has been accumulated that's outside of the dossier. And so all of the arrows continue to point to a personal, political, and financial relationship that Donald Trump had with the Russians. And whether it amounted to a crime or not is Bob Mueller's job. But I think we should do all we can to make sure that this doesn't happen again in the next election.
Yeah. I just hope that we can keep civil liberties intact along the way.
Absolutely.
I think you agree. Congressman, thank you very much.
Of course. My pleasure, Tucker.
Well, it's obvious by now that Hollywood attorney Lisa Bloom is a total fraud, an epic fraud on a global scale. Is she also a bald-faced liar? That's a rhetorical question. Our next guest has evidence of that, so stay tuned. Of lawandcrime.com, and she joins us tonight. So, Rachel, you had an experience that confirms what a lot of us have suspected for a long time, which is that Lisa Bloom is not on the level. Tell us what happened.
Well, Tucker, I went into this interview I did with her a couple of weeks back with a very open mind. But what ended up happening, this is when she was did work along with Harvey Weinstein to undermine some of these victims. And I found that a little troubling.
More than a little troubling. In fact, according to the transcript that I saw of your interview with her, she bragged basically and said, I'm bringing a feminist cast to this whole thing. A lot of people accused of sexual assault, sexual harassment, tried to discredit the accusers, but I'm going to make sure Harvey Weinstein doesn't do that.
Exactly. She said she was going to pull out a different playbook, start a new kind of way of handling these cases. I thought, wow, that's great. Let's try to stop the problem at the root. Well, apparently, if we believe reports that have come out in the New York Times and other very established publications, that is not what happened.
So what did she do instead?
Well, apparently she undermined some of the victims. She tried to leak information to about one of the victims, Rose McGowan, to the press. She apparently tried to pass around unfavorable photos. And again, this is coming from someone who hails themselves as a feminist attorney. And before this, I do want to say we had a very good working personal relationship.
Right.
I respected what she'd done. But this was, I think, a big mistake in that she represented Harvey Weinstein.
Right. I mean, if she were to come out and say, look, I'm an attorney and I will brutalize the innocent for pay. I will discredit people and lie about them if you pay me enough. I mean, there's a certain kind of honesty about that. But I guess why I'm galled by Lisa Bloom is that she poses as this person she's just better than you. She's just a good person and you're not, because she's representing all women. That seems totally false to me.
Well, listen, I'm not going to cast aside everything she's done in her decades-long career. She's certainly done some... Oh, well, you will, Tucker. But, she's certainly done some very good things for women who are in precarious situations that have been victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Some of the recent revelations that have come out involving the Trump accusers and Harvey Weinstein don't look favorable to her and really raise questions.
No, they look cynical and greedy to me. So how many times does she have to be exposed before the rest of us can say, you know what, I'm not going to take another moral lecture from you?
Well, listen, I think her credibility has already been hurt. And as you see in this Me Too movement with all these women coming forward, I don't really see her in the forefront. And this was an opportunity for her to kind of be the leader in this. And I think that a lot of victims perhaps aren't turning to her anymore because of this.
Good. Well, so there is a silver lining. Rachel, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, what are the political implications of today's televised negotiation on the immigration bill? Britt Hume joins us in just a minute with the answer.
It's time for Sleep Number's lowest prices of the season.
Today, the president struck a surprisingly moderate tone on immigration, or seemed to, while some congressional Republicans reminded him of the stakes involved.
Chain migration is so insidious. It is the fundamental flaw in the immigration policy of the United States. if any conversation about DACA is being held without that consideration, I agree with border security as well, but any conversation about that is not going to go anywhere in the United States Senate.
Britt Hume is Fox News' senior political analyst, and for good reason. He joins us to assess today's events. Hey, Britt, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm the oldest guy, right?
Well, there's
some
that.
People would say, yeah, some people would say senior moment political analyst.
I think you earned it.
It looked for a moment that, well, I appreciate that. It looked today as if the president himself had had a senior moment when Dianne Feinstein, as you reported earlier, said that she was hoping that there could be a clean bill on DACA fix, that is to say, the bill to let the Dreamers who are here illegally stay in the country. Yes. And the president said that that's what he wanted too. And the conversation proceeded along those lines, whereupon it became clear to the Republicans sitting around the table that that really isn't what Mr. Trump understood by a clean bill. And Kevin McCarthy, the House Majority Leader, interjected and said, Mr. President, I don't think that you quite understand what she means by that. She means a bill that would be DACA only. So, oh, no, I don't mean that. I mean DACA with the additional security measures, which is to say funding for the wall, an end to chain migration, and he added, an end to the lottery system. And that was what you heard Sonny Perdue pick up on in the soundbite you just played. So by the time all was said and done on this, the president had demonstrated he didn't understand what is, to all of us around Washington, a well-known term, that is to say a clean bill, but he did not really change his position on the issue.
So my sense, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but that Republican voters are watching their leaders more carefully than they have in years past because Republican voters in general are to the right of Republican members on immigration.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true of some Republican members and certainly a large number of Republican voters. And these are precisely, of course, Tucker, the voters who supported President Trump with his hard stance on immigration. And, you know, in which he suggested not only do we need to stop illegal immigration, but we need to get control of legal immigration as well. And, you know, that's sort of where he came out on this today. And I might add, Tucker, that what was interesting about the response to this session today, in which the president did something you rarely see a president to do, which is to sit there for an hour negotiating with congressional leaders of both parties with the cameras rolling. Yes. You know, you just don't see that very often, and I don't think it's the kind of thing that would square very well with the description of President Trump in this most recent book about which there's been such a sensation, which portrayed him as a total ignorant dunce with no grasp of policy, who never reads and never listens to briefings. He seemed pretty well briefed on these issues, and he spoke of them with some fluency. And in general, I thought most people, you know, most unbiased people looking at that would give him a pretty high marks on it.
So do you think it's possible that his private posture will be different on the issues, on the specifics of border enforcement, chain migration, et cetera, than we saw today in the public meeting?
Well, I think by the time the public meeting was over, his posture was the same as what we've heard him say before, which is he's willing to do DACA, wants to do DACA, which is to say he wants to let the Dreamers stay here. He'd like to do that, but that he's going to insist on getting some security measures as part of any legislation to do that. And the question then becomes, of course, well, how much of the three things that he's asked for, border wall money, end to chain migration, and an end to the lottery system, will he be able to get? And when it gets down to it, would he reject a bill that didn't have as much of what he wanted as he's seeking? And I don't think we know the answer to that yet, but the position, that at least is the position that he's staked out.
Interesting. I think voters will be watching carefully. Britt, thanks a lot for that.
You bet, Tucker.
We'll be right back. Michael Cohen has filed a defamation suit against BuzzFeed.com for publishing that dossier of unverified allegations about Trump last year. We learned minutes ago that he's also suing Fusion GPS and its co-founder, former Wall Street Journal reporter Glenn Simpson, over what Cohen called, quote, the lie-filled dossier. This story is developing, and of course we'll continue to monitor it. Well, it's hard to believe with so much going on in the world, this show is over. You think it's always going to last forever, but it never does. That's it for us tonight. Tune in every night at 8 to the program that's the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. DVR it if you know how that works. And above all, stay tuned for Sean Hannity live from New York City next. We'll see you tomorrow.
Lying, pomposity, what's the other one? What's the other?